Hello, and welcome to Men Making a Difference, a new series powered by Ujima. Today's talk is all about men, fathers, and father figures working collectively to end domestic violence. I'm your host, Matthew Winter, Director of Development for Ujima, and I'm joined today by four esteemed guests whom I'll now introduce one by one. So, first, coming to the stage, we have John Goodloe Jr. John Goodloe Jr. is a native Washingtonian who still resides in the area. Unfortunately, is a Commanders fan, but he resides with his wife of 25 years, Dawn, and their 17-year-old daughter, Madison. He values family time and enjoys spending time by the water, attending sporting events, especially football, going to the movies, and visiting museums together. John's advocacy for domestic violence prevention began after the tragic loss of his cousin, who was killed in 2016 by a former partner. John has been involved in domestic violence advocacy since, including serving on the board of the DC Coalition Against Domestic Violence for 8 years. He stepped down in December 2024 after completing his term as board chair, and he serves as the board secretary for Ujima. He is a founding board member of our Ujima, which is the National Center on Violence Against Women in the Black Community. So, John, thank you for joining us today.
Happy to be here. Thank you.
Great to have you. All right. So, next up, we have Ramon Green. So, Ramon is originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and currently serves on active duty as an instructor at the Defense Information School. With over 19 years of military service, he has built a long and distinguished career. Ramon is divorced and a proud father of three, one son, age 19, and two daughters, age 13 and 8. He has a passion for playing sports, writing poetry, and working out. A published author, Ramon released his first poetry book, Hard to Heal, on February 22nd, 2022. Outside of his career in sports, he is always seeking personal growth and opportunities to connect with new people and new challenges. Ramon, welcome to Men Making a Difference.
Thank you for having me.
All right, excited to have you. Next up, we have Cam Austin. Cam Austin was born in North Carolina and grew up in Prince George's County, Maryland. He's a graduate of allegedly the real HU, Hampton University, and holds an undergraduate degree in business administration and an MBA. He's a school teacher in the PG County Public School System, where he teaches fourth grade math, science, and health. A former high school athlete, he continues to enjoy playing basketball with his friends. Cam, welcome to Men Making a Difference.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
All right, excited. And last but certainly not least, we have Marcus Davis. Marcus Robert Davis was born in 1988 in Dallas, Texas. He's a proud father to his 13-year-old son, Skylar Andre Davis, and actively coaches his youth basketball team. Marcus joined the United States Army in July 2011 and has served at several duty stations. He was actually deployed to Uganda in support of Operation Observant Compass and has completed 2 deployments to Djibouti in support of Operation Freedom Sentinel. Marcus, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, my brother, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, we're very excited to do this. This is the first of hopefully many, but I want to, before we jump into it, I do want to make sure that I introduce Ujima. So Ujima, as I mentioned, is the National Center on Violence Against Women in the Black Community. And our work is to address the pervasive issue of sexual assault, domestic and community violence within the Black community. And the work that we do is all to mobilize our community into collective action. Collective work is not only at the core of what we do, but it is literally in our name, Ujima. And having conversations like this, in addition to the physical work that we do, is all part of what we hope will end domestic violence once and for all, not only in our community, but in the world overall. So everyone, thank you for joining us today. This is going to be a great conversation. And really just to start us off, I really want to kick it off with some really important stats. Now, these are important, but they're also very jarring stats. And a lot of the work that we do is rooted in these three stats at Ujima. So the first is that 1 in 4 Black women and girls are murdered per day in the United States in 2020, which is an unfortunate stat. The second one is that 40% or more of inter-partner violence is the leading cause of death for Black women between the ages of 18 and 34. And finally, Black women are 2.5 times more likely to be murdered by men. So these are three stats that, again, are extremely unfortunate. They are far too large, but they also underpin the work that we do at Ujima and a lot of what we want to talk about today, not only as men, but as Black men, because unfortunately, there's just too much violence and too much domestic violence going on in our community. And so gentlemen, um, really, I want to start with the genesis for all of us. I want to be able to just have a conversation about what our life experiences were, and how those shaped what we think about violence and safety for Black women and girls. So I'm actually going to pose that question to John first. So John, again, if you could just give us a little bit of information about what your life experiences have been. And obviously you have a very close experience with that, if you'd like to share as well.
First, thank you, Matthew, for the opportunity just to be here and to share in this moment with all of you brothers. And so I think it's a really important conversation for us as men to have, and to expose that conversation to the world. So thank you. As far as my own personal life experience, um, the most impactful and most recent experience was the one that you talked about in the intro. And that was when my cousin Stephanie Goodlow was killed in 2016 by a former partner. Um, and I think that what struck me about that was, one, you know, anytime someone is killed, it's not like it's unexpected, right? And so, um, what it led me on though was this journey of just learning more about domestic violence, and I became exposed to some of those stats that you talked about. Learning about, you know, as jarring as it was for me and my family, seeing, as I was doing the research, that this isn't an uncommon thing that's happening across this country. And so um, that was heartbreaking for me. Number one, just to realize that, uh, that this is happening so often. And then it kind of tuned my ears to really listen to all of the stories that come across the news uh, every day, every week, and we hear it all the time. Um, but we're just, unfortunately, I believe, have become desensitized to it, or at least I had. And so that 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 was the first or the most recent and impactful instance. But it also forced me to kind of think back on my own life journey, stories that I had heard from my family. My grandfather talked about, um, his experiences, honestly abusing my grandmother in the past, and, just the things that he had contemplated, killing my grandmother, killing her brothers. Thank God he didn't do those things. Um, but it was, that I realized was part of this family story, unfortunately. And so all of that has kind of shaped who I am today. Um, Not only recognizing that, and seeing the impact that it can have on our lives when tragedy does strike, but my grandfather was one of the most meaningful people in my life. And so seeing, that his life could change, and that he could become a different and better person. But it took that transformation in his life for that to happen.
Thank you for sharing, John, and I'm sorry to hear about your cousin. But through that unfortunate event, it's springboarded you into helping to do the amazing work that you've gone on to do. So thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
And then, yeah, I'll pass it on to anyone else who would like to go next. But we all have our life experiences, and similar to John, it's unfortunately too pervasive in our family. So if anyone else would like to go next.
I'll take it. The next one. Um, I think my first encounter with domestic violence was with my second older brother. Him and his girlfriend was just always arguing, but like one day it just got to the point where he put his hands on her in a very serious manner, and it shocked me, the first time I seen it. And I couldn't move, I couldn't do anything. I'm just like sitting there just watching this thing play in front of me. And he's even went to the extreme of putting his hands on, my mother at one point in time. So
Uh,
that what shocked me the most, just seeing him, um being physical with the person who gave us life, you know what I'm saying? And I've interacted with people in the service too who have, very serious and very realistic, stories detailing, their domestic violence and how they survive stuff. But it made me think that, how they survive those situations and their overcoming obstacles, that it's more than physical safety, it's more about being able to have an environment where they're heard and where they, how to be able to just open up to say stuff about that type of stuff. So yeah, even being valued is the most important thing too. So yeah.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think, the story that you shared about your brother, that's not too dissimilar than things that people have seen in their families as well. So I'm sure that a lot of folks at home who are going to be watching this who have been able to look back on moments in their life that those things stick with you. These are things that when it happens the first time is so out of the ordinary, but then you look back and you're like, well, actually, this isn't actually that out the ordinary. Is that it's the first time I'm seeing it in front of me in this way. So thank you for sharing that, Ramon. Uh,
Appreciate.
Marcus, Cam, either of you would like to share?
Yeah, I can dive in on this really quick. I actually seen it firsthand as a child, like my mom and dad having their moments. And when you're a kid, you just think it's mom and dad arguing. But as I've grown older, I realized like they had a very toxic situation. Um, my mom met my dad while he was still married. So when I came about, they wasn't even in a relationship. They were just, two people working together and boom, here I come. They didn't get married until after I was, 4 years later. Yeah. So that's when my little sister came. So once my little sister came, that's when they got married. He was finally divorced and, they decided to move on. So you can tell like their relationship wasn't built on a solid foundation of love and, starting a family. It was more so like a situationship that kind of just blossomed into, all right, we got to do this thing and we have to make it work. We have a family now. So I remember seeing it like in the house, my dad doing what he wanted to do, my mom coming down on him hard, which was very fair. But you're a kid, you just say, "Hey, stop yelling," yelling at my dad, or "Dad, stop yelling at my mom." But they tried to make it work for me and my sister, but it just didn't happen that way. Cause at the same time my sister was born, I also have another sister named Amber Yeldell. But I lost her in the system through adoption. But that was a very trying time for my mom and my dad because my mom just thinking it was just, the kids he had before her and just me and my sister. But I also have a younger sister that's the same age as my baby sister Maya. So remember seeing them fight and getting into it all the time. I'm just thinking that's what adults do. And as I got older, I remember I was picking up those same traits until I was sat down by a gentleman much older than me. And he told me that's not the way to go about it. Like, just you have to talk to your partner. You got to be more understanding. And I could have been one of those people who had a similar path as my dad, and ended up being another horrible story about domestic violence. But I was caught at a very young age. I'm talking about like 12, 13, where I was, told to express my emotions and how to talk to people and how to react to certain things. And but we're going to get into that more in the conversation, but just seeing it firsthand, it was very ugly. So yeah.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing. And Ken, when bring us home on this one.
All right. So I haven't had too. I mean, I really haven't had too much experience with domestic violence. My parents are divorced, and they didn't get along a lot of the times. So, but it never really got really that physical. So, it just somebody that just didn't get along. So I haven't had too much experience with domestic violence.
And that's a good thing. I mean, look, there's some things that is good to be an outlier on. I'm with you on that one. My parents, they split when I was younger. Fortunately, I've never witnessed any domestic violence in the home. Doesn't mean that it didn't take place, but fortunately, I didn't experience it, and it's not something that has been a part of our experience. But it's one of those things that with any relationships are hard. We all know, um, you know, majority of you are fathers. I'm not a father yet, but relationships are hard. And I think when we're not given the tools, or at least what's been modeled to us of how to deal with hard situations or how to have tough conversations, especially when they get contentious, there's so many situations where it's the easy thing to do is to be violent, unless you have something that you can lean on to be able to say, this is not the way to handle that. So as we go on in this conversation, just being able to know where we're all kind of rooted in our experiences, it does kind of dovetail into who we are as men today. But on the topic of fatherhood, so as I said, many of you are fathers. So how has becoming a father shifted your perspective on domestic violence and just accountability in general?
Man, let me tell y'all this. After seeing what I saw at a very young age, I wanted to make sure that Skylar, my son, never sees anything like that. Like, I consider sheltering my son to a lot of nonsense that goes on in the world, but this is a wide open world. He has the internet, he has TikTok and YouTube, and insert whatever type of social media is popping at the time. But one thing I tell my son is just open up with your emotions, because kids don't know how to navigate that. They could be happy one minute and then full of anger the next. So for one, women are our queens. We love women. We need women in our lives. You have to be supportive of them. So if you ever have an issue with a woman, you need to understand where she's coming from off top, off the rip. I don't care if she make me in the wrong or not. Hear her out. Let's get her understanding. And you should never raise your hand to her. So that's a game he know we don't play in this household.
Right.
So
Right.
that's my stand.
And shout out to you for making a point to do that, because I'm sure it's not easy. It shouldn't be as hard, but it's also not easy to be able to, have to course correct in some instances and being able to say that in real time. So props to you. How about you, John, Ramon? What do you think?
Yeah. So, from my perspective, I've got a daughter. Having a daughter softened me in ways that I did not anticipate. Um, and even while my wife was pregnant, at first I thought it was a little, I just thought to myself, it's a little boy in there. And so the way I talked to her belly changed the moment I went from thinking that it was a boy to believing it was a girl, and then having that confirmed by the doctors. And so, when it comes to the way that, my life has changed by my daughter, it's changed in every way. Um, I told her, I was like, I think my voice even went up an octave when you were one. You know, I went from, the deep bass to, hey, baby. It's so, I mean, I'm forever grateful to Madison for that. And for changing her dad in ways that she'll probably never recognize or realize fully. Um, the way that it, kind of affected me in terms of domestic violence, I mean, that's my baby girl. And so everything that I do is to protect her. And she was born when my cousin Stephanie, was killed. And so I think that was one of the things that was so jarring about that experience, is that I had a daughter and was losing my cousin, and Stephanie and we were just 5 months apart in age. And so we grew up really closely together. And so kind of that experience of, having a young daughter, losing my cousin that was close in age to me, and thinking about, who I knew her to be, at my daughter's age, who I saw her grow to be as she got older, just shifted, shi it shifted something, for me, for lack of a better word. Um, when it comes to kind of what I've attempted to show to Madison, one of the things that's been really important to me is to show Madison a loving relationship, and to show her an honest relationship, and to show her honesty in relationships, whether it's, somebody you're in partnership with or just in community with. And so I think having her see that and witness that, and having her participate in that in our relationship, I think we've got the most beautiful father-daughter relationship I could ever want. Um, and so I'm forever grateful for that. But I think it's really based on this honesty that she and I have, and that I really hope that she finds sometime later in life, later in life, from from her partner. Um, that uh, she can be fully herself. She can express herself fully, and there will be someone who uh, can allow her to be all of those things, and to grow as a person over the course of her life, because we never say the same. And so I think one of the challenges that I feel is often the case is that we get into these relationships and don't give people the flexibility to grow. And we want to keep people in this box, or that folks want to keep people in this box of, you are this thing. And we're never just one thing, we're complex people, we're complex individuals. And so my prayer for my daughter is that she will always continue to grow into that better version of herself, and that she'll be surrounded by people, friends, lovers, whatever, that allow her to do that as she grows older.
No, that's beautiful. Thanks, John.
Sure.
Ramon, I know you have two daughters. So is everything that John said, you relate to that 100%?
I can relate 100%. And I always said God got a sense of humor. And when my daughter came, I'm just like, man, I'm about to become Wesley Snipes, John Wick, everybody in the same thing. It's just like it instantly put me in the mode of protection. It's just like, how am I going to protect her? And it just shifted. I started thinking about the worst things to happen. And like, I'm supposed to be enjoying this moment that my daughter entered the world. But I'm like, what's going to happen? How should I react to it? But it definitely shifted me into being a full blown protector. And what an incident happened with my daughter, who's my youngest daughter, who turned 8 actually. Um, it was some little boys in our neighborhood that took her purse, and they was playing keep away with it. And I'm like, once her mama called me, I was just like, well, I'm on the way. I started grabbing stuff. And then my daughter, my 8-year-old, she FaceTimed me and she was like, Daddy, are you coming? I said, yes, baby, I'm on the way right now. She was like, I don't want you to come. I said, why not? Because you're gonna hurt somebody. I was like, well, I'm not gonna hurt anybody, honey. Not yet. But that lets me know that I wanted my children to know that by any means I will protect them. I am their first line of defense until they get married. So that's the main thing that shifted once I had children. Lord Jesus, help me.
And then you had another daughter after that. So
So it's the 13-year-old and the 8-year-old, and my 13-year-old, she's very respectful, and she don't ever come to me with any issues. Honestly, we teach her, me and her mom teach her just the basics about boundaries, your emotions and how how you should be able to express them, even when they tell their emotions to us. How we react to that can shift their whole perspective about things. So I try to keep myself in line, but I want them to know most importantly that I am their protector. You know what I mean? Next to God. Let's just say that. I don't want to throw the Heavenly Father out of that, but next to God, I want to say that I am your first line of defense. Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely. And something that we all kind of touched on that I definitely want to go a little bit deeper on is accountability, because I think we're in the social media generation, and what accountability looks like today, even versus when some of us were growing up, versus when our parents were growing up, that looks different. And also what expectations around accountability are. And so I think us as men, you know, we want to be able to hold ourselves accountable, but it's not always the easiest thing to be able to hold others accountable, because at the end of the day, we're our egos may be fragile, or other people's egos may be fragile, or they may not necessarily feel comfortable hearing from somebody else, you're doing this wrong, or what they hear as you're doing this wrong if it's a suggestion. So, when it comes to just accountability in general, what does that look like for you in your circle? How do you hold yourself first and foremost accountable, and how do you hold the other men, whether it be your friends or your family members? How do you hold them accountable?
I think it starts with self reflection for one, self reflection, and having realistic conversations at the end of the day. Um, and if you see something that's problematic, address the issue instead of allowing it to just kind of prolong itself until something serious happens. So once you see something, but people always reveal themselves through conversation. So you have to listen to what they don't say, not what they're saying, what they don't say, and then address that exactly how it's supposed to be. So I think that's how men will keep other men accountable for their actions.
Absolutely. And speaking of that, it obviously starts with, before we become men, we become boys. And so Cam, you're a grade school teacher. So in many ways, a lot of the accountability, not to put all the pressure on you, but it starts with people like yourself, because we learn accountability at a young age from our teachers. And I don't know how many of you have had male teachers, but black male teachers, we are some of the rarest of the rare. And so I'm sure you can, what accountability looks like for you with the young men that you and just young people that you encounter on a day-to-day basis. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what that looks like for you.
Okay, so first I just so when I first met my students, I just and this the students I have, I just let them know the expectations that I have for them first, and so to let them know it's the about boundaries and keeping the hands objects to themselves, and also in class I teach them to be responsible and be responsible for their actions. So that's how a way that I or tactic that I use to help my students be accountable for what they do, and just let them know the outcomes for their actions, and every action has a equal and opposite reaction. So that's the message that I try to send to my students.
Do you find that they're receptive to it? Because again, we're in a different generation where, I have a 17-year-old nephew, and though I'm not a father, in many ways I'm a father figure. And I know that when I keep it real with him, I see sometimes the reaction on his face. It's like, oh man, I'm being held accountable right now. Like, I can't believe you coming at me this way when all I'm doing is just giving you honesty. So
Right.
how do fourth graders, how do they react to that?
Most of them, 98% of them, have a positive reaction to it. So they understand what I'm telling them, and they understand why. Like some of their classmates may have reacted to them the way they did, and so like in group activities or at recess, just different. There's different ways that they interact with each other. I see that they have a positive reaction to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Marcus, what about you?
Well, I'm a coach, so I have a lot of kids. That's why I say they are my kids. They are my babies. Um, One thing I do as far as accountability, because all these young men that I deal with don't come from the best opportunities. So I used to coach in PG County at Glen Arden, and then I moved over to DC where I was at City Life, and where I'm at now is Severn. So I've been around a lot of young men who have a life outside the sport that I usually coach them in. And a lot of times they try to bring that attitude down to the field or to the basketball court. So one thing I really do now as a basketball coach, we're not even talking about football because that's a completely different monster. There's more kids and more personalities to juggle. But with basketball, A lot of my kids want to show up wearing the shiesties, the black bubbles, pants hanging, down to their pants, below their waist and all that. I don't accept that. If you come in the gym looking like that, I hope your mama or your daddy or whoever dropped you off still outside, because I'm gonna kick you right out the gym. So one thing I'm big on, is character. You gotta play the part. You want to come here and play basketball, that's a luxury. That's something that your parents afforded you this opportunity to do. So you're gonna be respectful to me, and you're gonna be respectful to your parents. So you're not gonna come in looking crazy like you fresh off the street. All right. So how I hold them accountable. If you come in and you're not ready to practice, you better start looking like you're ready to practice. So no shiesties, no oversized coats. Can't come in sagging. A lot of them want to wear their headphones. That's cool. But it's a certain level of respect you got to have for your teammates. So a lot of my players, they got nicknames. Not with me. You're not finna bring your street name in the gym. It's whatever your number is. So my son is number 2. He will be dressed as number 2 in practice. You know, um, and a lot of parents, they kind of gave me flack about it, but I'm like, you're gonna understand soon enough that they are not who they think they are. Sometimes you got to mold them into to a better person, a better way they can carry themselves, because they're gonna start believing they little baby or little Dre. They're gonna start believing that, and that's the kind of person they're gonna present themselves as. So I tell them, you are your number right now. You finna hoop, you finna have fun, we finna win a lot of games. But you ain't finna bring all that outside world into this world that we creating here. So that's how I do it. That's how I hold my kids accountable. Even when we go out to play games, we all look the same. We gonna have on our 7 hoodies. We're gonna have our black sweats on, and we're gonna come out ready to play. So it's like establishing the standard. It's basically, I'm bringing the military to youth sports. So everybody's gonna look the same. We all go play the part. We're gonna come in and be respectful. We're gonna have a great time, and then we're gonna celebrate. So that's how I hold my kids accountable. Don't bring that outside noise inside where we want to work.
Absolutely. And I think something important that you touched on is, for a lot of them, this may be the only environment where they have someone that's keeping them accountable. And whether it's really the military or whatever it's from, you know, they may have that initial rejection to it for the fact that it's so new. It's like nobody else holds me accountable in this way. And being able to establish that standard and that level of accountability, as you said, first and foremost to yourself and your teammates, those are things that to have that at least be instilled in them from a young age from another black man and not from someone who's outside of the culture, I think that can go a long way in terms of helping them to stay on a better path and at least being able to have respect for themselves and others who look like them before anything else. So shout out to you for that. John, anything you want to add to that? Before we move
Yeah, well, first thing I'll say is that my dad was an educator. So when he retired from Montgomery County school system, he was a middle school principal, and he would have absolutely loved you, Marcus. Absolutely. Um, he would have corrected you for saying finna, but he was English teacher. But accountability at all, there's that accountability at work, right? But no, I love what Marcus had to say about accountability, and really, I think that accountability comes into play when we're talking about our relationship with one another as men, right? And so we all know that we've, you know, have relationships and have had relationships with other brothers over the course of the years. And the men that you can do certain things with, and so, hey, if I want to go and do X, Y, and Z, I know I can call Ramon. I can't. Ramon's not going to get down with me if I try to go and do this other thing, right? And so I think that us doubling down on those relationships and really what we add to one another and those really, you know, through those interactions is so important, because really what we're saying to one another is, look, these are my standards. You know, I've got, yes, I'll go and do this, this, and this with you, but I'm not going to hang with you if you're doing that. If you're hurting your girl, I'm going to get in your ear if you're, putting your hands on somebody. You're not going to get at a boy if, if it's something that's harmful to yourself or to the people around you. And so, I think that we navigate that, or sometimes we circumvent that by saying, all right, I want to go and get with, the other friends. To your point, Marcus, as far as, the kids on your team, they know they can't do that in one environment, so they'll go and do it in another. But still, what's really important is the fact that there's somebody in your life that's holding you accountable. And so, even among us as men, knowing that there are our men in one another's lives that are holding one another accountable is so important.
100%. And as you were saying that, John, it made me think of something that I actually talk about with my wife from time to time because as men, we think we know our friends and we think we know our brothers or we know our family members, but the unfortunate reality is that we can't always vouch for other men in the way that we know them, because unfortunately, the way that many men interact with women is very different than the way that they would admit that they interact with them, until you hear of those interactions from women who have interacted with them. And so in the conversation I have with my wife, it's that, it's almost like that there's a silent accountability, that there's part of a reason why a certain friend or someone that may not show you that side of them, because they know that you or I will hold them accountable. Because to your point, John, they know that they can say a certain thing or make a certain joke or even do a certain thing, that if he said it to me or to our larger group of friends, we would never be with that, and you would definitely get ridiculed. And so that accountability, it comes down to respect, but it's definitely a standard that the more that you can instill that, it can hopefully lead to more people being, I guess, ashamed and less likely to want to be ridiculed, and hopefully that'll prevent them from doing things. But it always sticks out to me when I hear sometimes unfortunate things about men that I know, or people that I know of, where I'm like, I'm shocked to know that that is in that person, but I'm not, because going back to accountability, men for the most part will hold each other accountable. Some more forceful than others, but if there's a feeling that I'm going to be ridiculed by this group of men that I hold to a high standard, if they knew I did this, there's a lot of people out there that hopefully would do less harm if they knew that other people would find out.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so true, man. The one last thing I just want to add is I have so much respect for men who actively seek out those bonds, right? We always talk about iron sharpens iron. And so men who seek to be sharpened, I think is so important in our community, and so important to find people, looking at a room full of men, here, that I've, you know, found. And, I feel like we sharpen one another. And so I think that that's really important to seek out those friendships, those partnerships, and to allow ourselves to grow over the course of time.
Absolutely. Well, while we're on that topic though, so I mean, I think Marcus kind of spoke to it in terms of how he speaks to the young men in his life who are, on his sports team. But when these toxic behaviors are taking place, Marcus, I know you in the military. Ramon, I know you in the military. Where in these spaces, schools, sports, when we see these toxic behaviors, what does that accountability look like? And how do you actually disrupt those things if and when you see it? And what are ways that, and I'll add a second question to that, when we see those things, what would we like to see more of as men in trying to be able to correct those things when we see them?
I think Ramon said it perfectly. So, and we just talking military. Direct approach always works, in my opinion. Not with everyone. People may, see it differently. But I know the times I seen one of my homeboys going through something, and let's just say it's one of those domestic things, and you see that a lot in the military. Sometimes you just got to go tell your boy you tripping. Got to get out of here with that nonsense. I don't care if she started it or not. I don't care if you started it or not. We can't allow this situation to get any worse than what it is, because one thing we know with the military, if you get in trouble, they're gonna take your time and they're gonna take your money.
Mhm.
Do you got that to risk at this point? And we ain't even talking about the extra nonsense they can just give you and hang you down. But two things for sure: time and money. So I have always been direct when I seen one of my boys tripping, even in jokes, even in Oh, I was just playing. No, bro, you can't play like that because their perception, whoever may perceive it and hear it a certain way, that's their reality. So they go view you in that light. You can joke around all you want, but it's just certain jokes you can't have. Even if it's real, and real in the sense of like they are actively doing something that you don't agree with, you got to check them at that point, right there on the spot. And I'm not saying to say when you checking them, you being, mean or disrespectful about it. You kind of pull them to the side, like, hey, bro, that's not cool. They gonna need an explanation. Okay, too easy. I'm gonna give you the reason why that's not cool. And then we go sit here, we probably gonna have that weird look staring at each other. And I'm gonna tell you that's what it is. That's how I feel. We can go about our day. So I'm always take the direct approach about it. Even when somebody checking me on anything, I'm gonna sit there and take it. So that's how I see it.
I can say for myself, I use mentorship to kind of guide some of the men or just, women sometimes too, unhealthy, toxic behaviors. You know what I'm saying? So we try to shift the mindset of how that is actually happening. So they can unlearn those toxic behaviors, and having that, creating a safe space for anybody to talk would definitely benefit the topic a little bit more too. So I always have little mentorship sessions when I talk to people. Just this, we can handle this issue at the lowest level. So just talk to me because I'm not the enemy. I'm here to help. And as soon as I lay down the ground and make it safe, I usually just be direct. And it always, it seriously, 98% of the time, I'm gonna say 98% of the time, it always be successful. Honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. Cam, anything you want to add to that?
I would just say it's just accountability. I would say what that looks like. I would just say just owning your actions and just knowing how they impact other people. So that's just definitely a big part. Just
Absolutely.
other
Absolutely.
people.
And finally, I know, Marcus, you actually kind of like touched on this a little bit, but just in terms of, what's one action today? We're dealing with a time which, unfortunately, based off of the, you know, not to get political, but just based off of where we are in time, in culture, in history, unfortunately, there more than likely will be a rise in more domestic situations just because it is something that's being deprioritized for one reason or another. So, what's one action that we think in terms of today that we can do to start making a difference as men? Is it as simple as just being direct and being accountable, or do we think that there's anything tangible that we physically can do?
I think listening. We could just start there and just start listening, and whatever we receive, try to apply it. You know, everything we're not expecting for things to happen overnight, but we just need for the seed to be planted and for it to grow. That's all we really need. So I think listening is the first action I think should happen.
Yeah. Isn't it crazy how just listening more, we get a lot more of the answers that way, right? It's cra
Definitely.
it's crazy.
Yeah. But we also talking about this generation where everyone now has a platform to speak their own mind. Everybody has their own opinions, their own viewpoints. That's the difficult part. But it's possible because not everybody use their platform in good ways. But I know it's a lot of people out there that's trying to push a good narrative to, kind of change the mindset. Um, my thing is I want to expand on listening. We do need more listeners and we need more actions. We need more actions to happen. And I think it's just more so having tough conversations in public settings. Because a lot of times we just in these spaces where, you can get with your homeboys and your homegirls. Y'all are having these podcast-esque conversations at home. All right, we have these conversations. Let's go apply, what we talked about. Let's go complete these actions that we're doing. So as you say, plant the seed, I always say, be the ripple that creates the wave of change. So it just starts with a little drop in the ocean, and it creates that ripple, and now we have waves. That's how I see it. So Yeah, conversations, and let's just apply what we're talking about. It's easy to talk. Let's actually do what we're talking about.
Absolutely.
Just to add on to that, I would say definitely just leading by example. Just be the change that we want to see in people, and also just we could do more research about just being more accountable in certain situations, especially relating to domestic violence. We could do more research about just all the statistics that are out there about how often, how frequent we see how frequent domestic violence happens. So I'd say definitely we could do that.
Absolutely. John, what about you? What do you think?
I think everything that the guys have mentioned already, 100%. I support all of that. In addition to that, I would say one thing that um, in markets, I think you kind of touched on this as far as bringing more people into the conversation, and so I think that has to be a very intentional effort, right? Everyone who becomes aware then says, all right, I'm in these networks. Let me make sure that these networks that I'm a part of are aware of this as well. Um, that process started for me when, after my cousin, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this. I want to let everybody know, what's happening. Because I had this moment of awareness. I'm sure some folks in my life were like, shut up, John. I know this already. You're the one that's new to this. But I think it's so important for there to be those echoes. It's not that, you're the first person to say it. It's okay to be an echo, for a cause as impactful as this, especially Matthew, kind of going back to what you were talking about before. The other thing that I think is really important, and I think about this in terms of men in the Black community, is that Black women have done an awesome job of standing behind Black men and saying, we support you. These are issues that affect you. These are issues that affect your safety. And we want to make sure the world is aware of this. And we want to make sure that you know that you've got our back. Black women have been awesome in doing that. Black men have to do this very, very same thing when it comes to issues of domestic violence and issues of interpersonal violence, of standing next to, beside, and in front of their Black women and saying, we know that you are endangered. We know that you are not safe in certain spaces. And we will do everything that we can to protect you and to make sure that the world knows that these are places where you are unsafe. And to make sure that we are that echo for them in the same way that they have been that echo for us and for the men in the Black community. I think that there needs to be that partnership on both sides.
Absolutely. Well said. Well said. And I do think, just to kind of touch on that, John, I do think even my connection to the work and part of the reason why, without a doubt, when the opportunity presented itself to join Ujima, I said yes. And it's because though I've been fortunate and blessed to have not had direct experiences in my family, the minute that the conversation came up about domestic violence, you don't realize how close it is to home until you mention it to a sister or an aunt or your parent or a grandparent, and you realize that those statistics, that 1 in 4, if you have 3 to 4 Black women in your family that you love, just bring up the topic to them and you realize that it's much closer to home. And so just from that alone, it made me realize that it's one thing to now not know and be ignorant in not knowing. But once you do know, then what do you do? And it's not saying you have to be on the picket lines. It doesn't mean that you have to be, on the forefront of the movement. But what's the action that you take? And for me, I knew it was something that I couldn't put back into the bottle. I couldn't put back, the veil over my eyes. What is the action? I'm about action. If I'm about action in other areas of my life, I can't then choose this one thing that's so close to home that I choose to be inactive about. And so to the question of what to do today, I do think a lot of it is being less passive. What active looks like to all of us on this conversation is going to be different. and to the broader, Black men on a whole is going to be different. But being less passive and just thinking of what are things that I could be doing to at least be more active about trying to stop this. Because at the end of the day, it's never going to go away until we start making those little small moves. And even if it's having more conversations about it with the next generation, calling out instances that we see in the moment, those little things get us closer towards it not happening versus just adding to the lexicon of more and more examples of it actually happening.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, brothers, this has been an amazing conversation. We could keep this going all day, but I want to first and foremost say thank you for lending your time, talking about a topic that unfortunately hasn't been talked about enough. But hopefully, this conversation leads to it becoming more prevalent in not only our community, but just on a whole. So, what I do want to just say is, in addition to thank you, I want to be able to make sure that if there are any last words that you want to say to anyone that's listening, give you the opportunity to do that, and then we'll wrap up from there.
Well, look, I'll kick it off, Matthew. First, just to say thank you to you and the team at Ujima who are leading the fight on behalf of the Black community. There are many who are in this fight, in this journey, advocating it from many different angles, and I don't think there can be too many, because there's so many corners of the world that need to hear this message. So, I think my parting message will just be for folks, if you heard something meaningful, to take that seed and to apply it to your life, and to make sure that you share it with someone else. Uh, because I think silence is where domestic violence and interpersonal violence is able to thrive. It's like it thrives in darkness. It thrives in secrecy. Even in my own family, that I saw it. But when you expose it to light, when you expose it to these meaningful conversations, that's where you're able to start to change lives. That's where you're able to start to let folks know what the options are, who the resources are that folks can reach out to, what the different types uh, of, of domestic violence and interpersonal violence are. It's not just physical. It can be emotional. It can be financial. There's so many different dynamics. And so it's not until people realize that they can start to see. So if someone heard the messages today, go and share and make sure that those people know to pass it along.
Absolutely. Thank you, John. Anyone else?
Hey, first off, thank you for this opportunity. Uh, this was a great moment for me. I haven't really got to talk about none of this stuff, and this has happened in my life at a very young age, and I've seen it through the various stages in my life. So just to be able to speak on some of these issues that's going on in our community, thank you for giving me this opportunity to do so. But like John said, if you heard just something, anything that sparked whatever's going on in your life that you want to be able to make that change that any of us shared, take that action and do it. Like, it's only so much we can do just sitting back watching it from the sidelines. Get in the game, make a play, make that change happen. That's all I got.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, everyone. And again, the conversation doesn't have to end here. Please, we invite you to follow us on social media. We are Ujima. Um, Also on our website, we have tons of resources that you can learn a lot more. ujimacommunity.org. Please join our mailing list and make sure that you look out for additional content in the future where we'll continue to go deeper on this topic and everything else relating to ending domestic violence and interpersonal violence. Thank you again, and looking forward to chatting with you all soon.